All right, we're back. Q&A. New week, a bunch of good questions. Let's get into it. First question, what are my thoughts on WW? WW is Weight Watchers, not a new potential world war. Weight Watchers. I think it's great for some people. The reason I think that it's great is it gets people into learning about nutrition, being mindful about foods and the intensity of some foods, understanding the ones that are like, they call them free foods, which is something I also don't love, but you start to understand like what foods are calorically dense, what foods are gonna move you towards your goals, and basically like a system and way to track that. And track those foods. Also, they do a really good job of winning on the accountability front and being part of basically a plan. So I think for those reasons, it's great. Reasons that I don't necessarily love it is it doesn't always correlate with like nutrition facts on a food label. So like in a realistic sense. Also, some of their like free foods where they like you can unapologetically eat them as if they literally are calorie free, sets people up for the understanding that there are foods that are calorie free, which is not actually true. And I know at one point they had avocados, which are super calorically dense as a free food. I don't know about you, but I can eat 2,000 calories worth of guacamole like there ain't no thing. So I think for that, it's a great introduction, but it doesn't always carry over to the real world outside of that community. Also, I feel like people work really well in those parameters, but then once they're outside of those parameters, they struggle with how to then reintegrate into life without that accountability, because what they learned was a system that differs a little bit from basically like reading nutritional labels and having a deeper understanding of that. That being said, people have made phenomenal progress with it. What are your thoughts on the TRex? Is it worth it? I travel a lot for work, live somewhere for a week or so, so being at a gym is unrealistic. I think a TRex is amazing. I think it's something that, especially for you traveling and living in new places, a TRex is a phenomenal way to get a lot of resistance training, which can be challenging when you just have your body weight. So oftentimes it's easy to do push-ups, burpees, things, mountain climbers, all kind of the plank variant things when you only have your body weight, because it's a way to improve the difficulty against what your body's seeing. When you have TRex, you're able to do a lot of pulling movements, a lot of shoulder health movements. You're able to help facilitate getting into the bottom of a squat or bottom of a lunge if you're more of a regressed individual or just starting out. So for that, it's a phenomenal movement. Or a phenomenal system. You can also use it for a lot more like isolated work, tricep extensions, bicep curls. You can do like rollouts on it, many different pulling variations. Your toes can go in it for like various core movements. Your heels can go in it for hamstring and glute work. There's a lot of different things you can do, and all you need is a door to shut it in, a door, a tree outside, a deck, something like that you can hook it off of. So that really eliminates the excuses for a lot of people. And I like it. I use it often with clients in person to help regress certain patterns, or as we're like neurologically learning different positions. It's a way to do it where you're decreasing the amount of load or movement on your body. And it's a way to ensure that you can hit patterns and positions correctly before you're going at them without the assistance. So it's definitely something that I would say is worth it. Since TRex it was super popular for a while and it's fallen off, a lot of other companies have come out and made suspension trainers, which is what TRex is. So there's other cheaper models as well that you can get into that are honestly qualities all pretty much consistent. Hex bar or straight bar for deadlifts. So hex bar is basically this hexagon that you stand inside of. And it basically goes around you, and the handles are neutral. So the handles are going to be right on the side of your legs, whereas a straight bar or a typical barbell is going to be the weight's going to be in front of your shins. With a hex bar, typically people can learn the positions and the patterns a little bit easier because your hands naturally want to be by your sides. So for like a beginner, a hex bar is a phenomenal way to basically introduce adding some weight to that might be a little bit more advanced than like a kettlebell. In terms of the straight bar, there's a lot more technique that needs to be had and understood, but the ability to like create tension through your lats and then for that to carry over to other things is huge as well. Honestly, I think it's a skill to learn both. If I have like one session with somebody, I'll use a hex bar. But I think learning how to move a straight bar is super important, especially if you're in the beginning of the process of learning how to move with a barbell, because it's something that then you can use that and layer on many different stimuluses and movements from there that's the foundation of. Also, you're most likely not going to find a hex bar everywhere you are, but you're way more likely to find a barbell where you are. The other advantage to hex bars too is it has two different heights. So you can have like a lower handle, which would be closer to the ground, increasing range of motion, or a higher position, which allows you, if you're limited with range of motion, instead of having to elevate it on plates or something like that to make up for your discrepancy in range of motion, you can do it just by flipping it over. Also, it's a way to load some farmer's carries as well. So it is versatile. But if somebody's going to be consistent with training for a time, I tend to move towards a straight bar. Maybe that's the purist in me. How do you get past a mental block about training? Really good question. There's many reasons why you want to do something and many reasons why you don't want to do something. Regardless, I think for starting a new habit or getting over a mental block or trying to create new change, ultimately just start. Like oftentimes people will make it a way bigger deal. Like roll out into the gym, into your space, wherever you're going to move and hit a warm-up set. Just start going. Like oftentimes you know logically that you want to do it. It's when it's time you're like, oh man, reading sounds nice, or maybe like seeing a friend sounds nice, or maybe I'm just tired and like social media is sucking me in on my phone. But create ways to understand why you want to do what you're doing. And then ultimately it's going to be a lot easier. So oftentimes with creating new habits or getting going on things and you want to make something easier, remove anything that can potentially jam you up or basically decrease resistance. And if you're trying to stop bad habits, basically put in a ton of resistance so it's super hard to basically get into that habit you want to drop. So for reducing resistance or making it easier, one thing that I would say would be find accountability. So hire a coach. Like if you're not logging your sessions and you work with me, like you'll hear from me, or I'll check in and just say like, how are you doing? What's going on? I train more sessions than not with a buddy. I know he's going to come over and we're going to get after it, and we have our program that we're following. And I sure as shit am not going to disappoint him by not coming out here and getting after it. But if I was left to my own and I'm more motivated than the average person, I'd say, there's a good chance that some of these sessions I might read or go do something else or, work more, something like that. So having accountability. And then also at the end of the day, find something that you really do enjoy doing. Like if you were told that spinning is the holy grail of movements and you fucking hate spinning, don't spin. Find something else to do. Try a bunch of different things. And then you can go from there. What are your thoughts on CrossFit? I personally love CrossFit, but that's going to come with a big old asterisk. So the reason I love CrossFit is, one, they win on community. Like they absolutely, unapologetically win on community. All of my very close friends have come from CrossFit gyms. You create this and you're part of, whether you're just dropping in or you've been there for a long time, this community where it's like shared suffering, and ultimately like through that you create bonds and connections with people that really do go a lot deeper than anything else I've found, at least in a quick sense. The second thing is you're introduced to a lot of different modalities of training. So it's really, really easy to fall into the style of training or the type of workout or whatever that or you've done previously. And then it's kind of the sunk cost fallacy where you're like, I'll just keep doing what I know because I know it and there's safety and comfort in that. Sure. But with CrossFit, you're introduced to the body weight movements. So you're like you have body weight lunges, you have air squats, you have push-ups, you have burpees, you have those types of things. You have the gymnastic movements, which is like all the stuff on a bar. So pull-ups, kipping pull-ups, toes to bar, muscle up, ring work. You have the power lifts. So you have bench press, deadlift, back squat, and then the accessories of those. You have the Olympic lifts, which is clean and jerk, and you have the snatch, and then there's all the accessory movements that go of that. You have the aerobic pieces, which is, how do you best utilize the rower, the bike, the skier, running, all of sandbag work. And then to that point, you have sandbags, you have Atlas stones, you have farmer's carries, yokes. You're introduced to all of these different stimulus, which are really neat, because for most people, like personally, had it not been for CrossFit, I probably never would have tried Olympic lifting. And because I got into CrossFit and I started doing CrossFit, I really noticed that I like the technical side of learning the Olympic lifts. Was it phenomenal for me to do 6 days a week? No. Did I love it? Yes, I did. I ended up by getting a coach, going into a deep dive of that. That's all I did for 2 years. I fucking love it. But it's one of those things I never would have known that existed, really, or would have tried it or even known what a snatch or a clean and jerk was had it not been for CrossFit. However, the big old asterisk is, on the other side of that, there's CrossFit gyms that do really well and have, highly educated coaches, and then there's CrossFit gyms that do not. In order to open a CrossFit gym, basically you pay a fee, and you can have a CrossFit gym. And then in terms of like being certified, it's literally like a weekend course to learn all the things I just mentioned, which is really silly. Luckily now, as people are realizing like there's good and there's bad, the bad ones do kind of get weaned out. But at the end of the day, because of all those different things, and if the coaching isn't up to snuff, and it's a more competitive environment, it's one of those things where injuries, and fairly significant injuries, can happen. So my biggest thing to anybody that's doing it is like, you really have to advocate for yourself, because they don't really worry too much about injuries. Nothing's that personalized. You're doing things at prescribed loads and weights and for time and things like that. So if you're injury prone, dealing with injuries, recovering from injuries, or you're like outrageously competitive, while that's probably an appealing thing for you, it's also kind of a dangerous thing. So that being said, I love it for many reasons. I'm cautious around it for many reasons, but those are my thoughts. Heavy weight for low reps, light weight for high reps. I have friends that tell me both, and neither think the other is correct. Woo! I love a good old debate. I'm going to go right down the middle and say both. But I'll expand on that. The reason I say both is it's important to understand what you're training for. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? So as you're building power or strength, it's going to be more on the lower rep range, which means at the lower rep ranges, the weight's going to have to be higher because the stimulus is calling for that to be so. Now, which is great. Like, you're going to need a lot of recovery in between sets and things like that. On the other side, you have the lightweight for high reps, which builds more of like a muscular endurance. I feel like a mental durability side of things. So I think at the end of the day, what is better? I think a blend of both. Like, personally, I want to be as strong as possible, because being strong is never a weakness. So I'm going to do the lower reps and really push the weight, make sure the tempo stuff is there. But I'm also going to do the lightweight for high reps. Like, I'm going to do max sets of push-ups and pull-ups, and I'm going to do, various accessory movements where like I really start to suffer, because I'm building that capacity. It carries over to life. And honestly, that layered on top of a strength foundation is really good. So for those clients of mine, you'll see that we do lower rep ranges where we focus on tempo and positions and things like that. But then we also have like these higher work capacity sets and conditioning efforts where we're working on that as well. And that's exactly why. Do I believe in cheat meals? I really dislike the view of cheat meals because what are you cheating on? You're not cheating on anything. And I honestly think if you're viewing something as cheating on, you're shooting yourself in the foot, because what you're doing is probably too restrictive that you feel like you're cheating, which implies that you're wrong. Eating a certain food or overeating or over-enjoying or whatever is not wrong. It's part of fucking life. So I would strongly encourage you to not view something as cheating. Just understand maybe you went off the rails a little bit in terms of what you're doing in that time period. Let's say you picked a month that you're working on being in a calorie deficit to lose a few pounds, feel better in your skin. Great, that's awesome. But you had a friend's birthday, wedding. I had a client it was their wedding and they were worried about their calories and what they were doing. It's their wedding. Like, how many times are you gonna do this? Probably once, maybe twice, but probably once. They were good people. We're gonna call it once. It's one of those things where, like, it's not a cheat meal, it's living. So if you're looking at it that way, I would say it's probably too restrictive. And at the end of the day, you're just looking to maintain balance. Again, like, if you take the long range view, one day isn't gonna make or break anything. You know, view it as a week. If you have a day that's higher, just subsidize by going a little lower the next couple days. It all comes out in the wash. Thoughts on caffeine? We'll call this the last question for time's sake. Thoughts on caffeine? You're talking to a huge coffee lover, so I'm a big fan of coffee. Coffee can also, and caffeine really can be a nice stimulant before training. It affects everybody differently though. So I would say, like, some people don't get any effects, some people get absolutely crushed by it. So this is a it depends answer. But if you're somebody that can drink coffee, have caffeine, things like that, you feel like it helps your performance and you can sleep well, you're not detracting from your sleep, have at it. It's not as much of a diuretic as people once believed it was. I wouldn't necessarily, like, get your hydration from coffee, things like that. But, you know, for a little pick-me-up before training in the morning, if you enjoy it, great. If it starts to affect sleep and you're not sleeping well because of caffeine, I would prioritize sleeping well. So either front-load caffeine more earlier in the morning, or just get used to going with less amounts, or just not having it later in the day. And I would go with that. The other point to this too that is beneficial is if you're somebody that really struggles with anxiety or is anxiety prone, research will show that caffeine can elicit more of those feelings and thoughts. So I would again, you're an N=1 experiment. So as you consume coffee, if you notice, like, whoo, okay, my mind's starting to run, maybe just reel that back in a little bit. So with that, covered a lot of good things. Weight Watchers, TRex, deadlifting, CrossFit, high weight, heavy weight for a lot of reps. We'll go with that one. All sorts of things. So if you have any questions that stem off of these, or any new questions or anything at all that I can help you with, please don't be bashful in letting me know. I absolutely love this stuff. These were questions I got from you guys, people watching this. So please keep them coming. And as always, I'm here to help. I love you guys.